Hello, grade 12, and welcome to a new lesson. New theme, natural disasters, and the lesson is called Devastating. More than 61,000 koalas among 3 billion animals affected by bushfire crisis. Okay, as you know, our theme is natural disasters, but before we get into the theme and its different dimensions, we have one last skill we're going to take this year, and it's figures of speech. I'm going to give you the 4 most common figures of speech that appear on official exams. Okay, the main purpose of using figures of speech, as we all know by now, is to make a writer's work more appealing, more attractive to the reader. Okay, simile, metaphor, personification. This is a quick review, of course. A simile is a comparison of two unlike things using the words as or like. He ran like a leopard seeking its prey. We're comparing him, he, to a leopard using the word like. In a metaphor, we're comparing two unlike things without using like or as. We are speaking of one thing as if it were another. The fire was a wild beast. I didn't say the fire was like a wild beast. It would be a simile. In a metaphor, I'm speaking of it as if it were something else. Okay? Personification is giving non-human qualities, giving non-humans, like things or animals, giving them human qualities and characteristics. Example, the ground screamed under the heavy tread of the machines. Of course, the ground cannot scream. Humans scream. Types of irony. The 3 types of irony are also common in official exams. First of all, there's verbal irony, which means when you say something while you mean the exact opposite. It's very similar to sarcasm. For example, you're as pleasant and relaxed as a coiled rattlesnake. Of course, here we are being ironic because a rattlesnake is never relaxed, okay, and is never pleasant, of course. You hand in a graded assignment to a student who got 2 out of 10 and you tell them what a great job you did. Of course, that is verbal irony. Now, situational irony, when something happens opposite of what you would expect. For example, a policeman who steals, a dentist who has bad teeth, a fire station that burns down, a marriage counselor who is divorced. This is situational irony, a situation that is opposite of what you might expect. Now, dramatic irony is much less common in scientific. In grade 12 scientific, dramatic irony is a type of irony where the audience knows something, the audience, the readers or the viewers of a movie or a series, they know something that the characters do not. For example, in a movie, the character buys a new house and he thinks it's nice, while the audience already knows that the house is haunted. Second example, in a book or play, the bride is waiting for her groom when the audience knows that he was just shot dead by the mafia. Okay, dramatic irony. Okay, now the last figure of speech we're going to take for this year is paradox. A paradox is a contradictory statement, a statement that is opposing, has two different or opposing ideas. But when you investigate it, it might prove to be correct or true. For example, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. This is one of the most widely known paradoxes. It was the beginning of one of Charles Dickens' most famous novels. And it was really, and during that time in the UK, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times, because for some people it was the best of times and for others it was the worst of times. Second one, save money by spending it. It might sound weird, but when, for example, you read the whole promotion, you will find that if you invest money in something, you will end up saving yourself some money. Third one, deep down, you're really shallow. Again, another famous paradox. This is the beginning of the end. Okay, there is a beginning to when something starts to end. So this is what a paradox looks like. Okay, now let's begin our lesson. Devastating more than 61,000 koalas among 3 billion animals affected by bushfire crisis. Okay, first of all, let's distinguish between natural phenomena and natural disasters. Natural phenomena are occurrences that happen in nature, but they do not cause destruction or loss in lives, such as rainbows, weather changes, erosion, waves, blood moon, electromagnetic pulses, the green aurora in Scandinavia. Those are phenomena, occurrences. Okay, many times beautiful occurrences. However, natural disasters are natural occurrences that do cause great damage and loss in life. Example, earthquakes, wildfires, floods, volcanoes, tsunamis, etc. And we do notice that there is an increasing trend in some natural disasters such as floods and wildfires, mostly, and it has become increasingly linked to change in climate, namely global warming, of course. The problem is this phenomena is leading to the perish or death of millions and also billions of species of plants and animals, as we have recently seen in the wildfires that took place or have been taking place in Australia recently. Okay, I'm going to read the first part of the article. More than 61,000 koalas and almost 143 million other native mammals were likely in the path of the Australian bushfires of late 2019 and early 2020, according to a major assessment to the ecological toll of the black summer blazes. Of course, in Australia, you might find this date weird, but in Australia, summer is in what we have here as winter, they have there as summer season. The estimate from 10 researchers and scientists contained in a report commissioned by environmental group WWF Australia recounts the devastating loss of habitats across the country. Of course, a habitat is a natural home of plant and animal species, such as a forest, a desert, a lake, an ocean, a pond. Almost 3 billion, this is a staggering number, 3 billion animals, including 2.46 billion reptiles, were in the path of the flames, the report says. The same number the team calculated in an interim report revealed in July by The Guardian. Okay, Dermot O'Gorman, chief executive of WWF Australia, says in a foreword that the report shows the fires were one of the worst wildlife disasters in modern history. Professor Chris, University of Sydney ecologist who helped guide the project, told The Guardian. Okay, so a lot of species were devastated by this. Okay, so it was a devastating occurrence in Australia, and mostly this article is concerned with one species, the koalas. 61,353 koalas were affected, according to Gorman, and this is a devastating number for a species that was already sliding towards extinction in eastern Australia. So they were pretty much concerned about this. Okay. Paragraph 9. If you work in the forest environment, then you know there's a lot more animals living in these areas that don't get the publicity. Other fantastic, charismatic animals like the gliders that live alongside them and are being whittled away as well. So many species, many of which maybe we haven't heard of or we didn't think might be living in those areas, are being affected. Paragraph 11, but large numbers of other species were likely to have been affected by the fires but were not noticed in the report. Okay, the report says freshwater fish and crayfish are known to have been badly hit but could not be reliably estimated. Authorities reported hundreds of thousands of fish dead after bushfire ash. Okay, why would fish die of bushfire? Because all this ash was washed down to the rivers where they live, and it ultimately killed them. and mud washed into rivers. The assessment also could not include arthropods, a group that includes insects, spiders, and other bugs, but pointed to other research estimating trillions of these were likely affected. I mean, you know, insects, of course, there are millions and millions and millions living in one small place, of course. The report includes 11 recommendations that call for better understanding of the impacts of bushfires, more research into species, where animals are, and better management of other threats. Alongside mortality caused by direct exposure to flames, smoke inhalation, heat, the sediment runoff, fire interacts with other stressors exacerbating threats to the persistence of threatened species and ecosystem, the report. Okay, and then the author goes on to talk about how the different flora and fauna in this Australian ecosystem are being affected, altered by the different fires. Species that are invading the area, they hadn't lived there before, but they find the area now more accessible, as you see in the picture in front of you. Okay, Australian flora and fauna have been affected. Flora generally refers to plants. The fauna refers to the animals in that ecosystem. Okay, now let's move on to the conclusion. That was only possible, he said, because the government knew where the wallabies lived. Australia had a moral and ecological responsibility to save the animals, he said, because the vast majority of those affected existed nowhere else on Earth. Of course, we're speaking of kangaroos, speaking of koalas, wallabies. Okay, and now look at the scorched land they live in. They do not have access to food or water. So what the Australian government did was through helicopters and airplanes, they would send to them, carrots, those who survived, of course, carrots and potatoes, etc., so that they could survive this scorched land they now live in. Okay, now answer the following questions using complete sentences of your own. What issue is the article discussing? The issue the article is discussing is, in one sentence, is how the Australian wildfires of late 2019 and early 2020 have affected billions of species of plants and animals, and namely koalas, who are on the verge of extinction. Now, what was Dermot O'Gorman warning about in paragraph 4? Okay, O'Gorman was warning that this issue will worsen due to climate change. So we will have more bushfires, more and more bushfires in the coming years because the Earth is heating. Okay. Moving on, identify and explain the figure of speech in paragraph 3 displayed in front of you. Okay. We find here Dermot O'Gorman, Chief Executive of WWF Australia, says in a foreword that the report shows the fires were one of the worst wildlife disasters in modern history. Professor Chris, a University of Sydney ecologist who helped guide the project, told The Guardian, the numbers of animals affected are absolutely huge. It's really a call to arms, meaning that we should be mobilized, we should be ready for this. Just as when there is a war, you call the army, you call them to take their arms, their weapons. So now he is trying to mobilize the world, to call them to duty in order to solve this problem. And of course, the figure of speech here used is a metaphor. Okay. Now, which species was a major concern to O'Gorman and the Environment Ministry in Australia? Of course, the species was the koalas, because this species is already threatened to become extinct. Okay, now let's move on to a different type of question, chart analysis. The bar graph below depicts the number of acres burned annually, meaning yearly, in California wildfires. 2010 until 2020. Let's analyze this chart. My question is, what can you conclude about the number of acres burning throughout the given years? Okay, 2010, 2011, here we have an increase, and then slight decrease, flattened, the curve is flattened, a slight decrease, and then notice how, it just spiked up. If you are to take a general look at it and compare 2010 and 2020, you notice that there is a sharp increase in the amount of acres that have been burned annually in California. Okay. This is the analysis. The bar graph depicts the number of acres burnt annually by wildfires, full stop. In the years 2010 until 2019, we noticed that the numbers fluctuated, meaning went up and down. However, if we compare the year 2010 to 2020, we notice that there is a huge increase in the number of burning acres related to wildfires in California. We can conclude that this is similar to the trend of increasing fires around the world in areas such as Australia and parts of Europe, which many scientists have attribute to global warming. Okay, so this is it for our lecture. For any questions you might have, please write them down and ask me during Zoom Live. See you then. Bye-bye.